Welcome to Module 11 of the Dissertation Journey. This is Dr. Terrence Duncan, and the title of this module is Abstract Approaches to Problem Solving. This is the third module of Chapter 2 of the Dissertation Journey. In Module 10, the scholar-practitioner approach towards synthesis of the literature, we covered the following key objectives. First, we evaluated the scholar-practitioner model. From there, we examined a transformational theory. Finally, we examined the approach towards synthesizing literature. You may recall how I said metaphorically, you as a student should tell me what stood out from a song or movie in your own words and context. Today, we have three objectives of this learning module, Abstract Approaches to Problem Solving. The key overall objective is to help you understand how your thoughts influence the doctoral process and the approach toward analyzing a viable approach towards the proposal development, as well as reviewing extant literature. The goals include the following. One, identify the differences between assumptions and inferences. The second is to apply assumptions and inferences towards dissertation and proposal development. And finally, you will detail creative thinking approaches towards problem solving. Inferences and assumptions are terms often used in academic settings, particularly for guiding doctoral learners as they continue to work on their assignments and approach towards their dissertation. It is important for students to distinguish the differences between the two as they approach their literature review and formulating certain elements of their dissertation. Otherwise, students will continue to struggle in aligning the research, and that will pose problems in the methodological approach towards their research design. An assumption is an unexamined belief by the individual without recognizing the statement of facts. Assumptions can also include the statement of opinions, and a statement of opinion provides something that may not be fundamentally supported by sound research, or the research presented does not align with the problem statement. From a researcher perspective, it is important to understand that relying on assumptions and not questioning them could increase errors from a scientific approach. Relying on assumptions also detract from advancing research and identifying gaps in developing an approach to solving complex problems. The questioning approach also can help the data differently, which can help provide the tools to advance ongoing research. Identifying the assumptions posed for research may also provide keys to identifying limitations towards the research proposal. Such limitations involve areas where complete control is difficult and constraints may pose problems to the research. These limitations stemming from the assumptions not only exist in doctoral research, but it is also present within a postdoctoral research approach. On this slide here, you will see the examples of assumptions under the qualitative and quantitative methods. For example, under a qualitative method, participants will answer the interview in an honest manner. That is an assumption under the qualitative design. Whereas in the quantitative design, you may note that the research hypothesis will be tested in the cause and effect approach. And although these are just limited examples, there are numerous examples of assumptions available, and you will be responsible for identifying them as you are working on your doctoral research. So what are inferences? Unlike an assumption, inferences involve the approach where a conclusion may arise without complete certainty. Inferences derive from a researcher's approach towards solving the problems based on a preliminary or final set of data. It is important to note how inferences are involved in the research and data analysis approach based on the research overall. First, we will cover the inferences in a quantitative research approach, including the fact that hard data presented for research to review and analyze. You will also be responsible for making a series of inferences from the data. You should note, however, that inferences come from a basis of the hypothesis. So when you are developing your quantitative design, you're going to have your null and your alternative hypothesis, and the data that comes from that stems from the actual hypothesis itself, and that's where you draw an inference from. Finally, another trait of emphasis in quantitative research is that the research tends to come from a population of interest, such as descriptive data. Qualitative approaches are open-ended, where the research seeks understanding and exploration. This approach is more subjective in nature and could be influenced with bias by the researcher in combination with the subjects being interviewed or artifacts being reviewed. Therefore, there may be some more ambiguity involved. Recall mixed method studies where it combines both approaches from the qualitative and quantitative methods in previous learning modules. The combination of these two approaches benefit the researcher by probing for themes and identifying current or additional complex issues first, and then collects the hard data to validate assumptions and provide inferences more aligned with the problem statement. So I wanted to provide an example of inference in something more recent, such as the coronavirus. And if the research was associated with the likelihood of individuals taking the coronavirus vaccine in the Southeast region, you would have a theoretical framework to justify the approach and development of the relative surveys to collect the hard data. So in this particular slide, some of the initial findings, just based on a variety of research, includes that individuals at 65 and older died at a faster rate than any other demographic group. And one of the inferences from the data is that the virus is more lethal with the elderly population. Another study could have been conducted, or actually another study was conducted within the first 6 months of the pandemic. And it was noted that minorities, particularly African Americans, died at a disproportionate rate. An inference from that particular study could be that underlying health conditions and comorbidities are higher with these ethnic groups, and thus they are at higher risk. So in a situation like this, what should the researcher do? Having the data and the information by the initial study is beneficial, but in a situation like coronavirus, additional study has to occur. And so as a doctoral researcher, you should identify that more so as gaps in the literature. So these researchers who have conducted these trials of the vaccine, or if they conducted research in a particular demographic, they may have got their initial results, but that doesn't provide the overall context of the roots of the problem. So you should conduct additional research to analyze root causes, and it should also help shape public health policy and protocols if you were a researcher in this particular subject interest. Next, we will examine how creative writing is beneficial in literature review. Over several modules, we discussed synthesis of the literature. At this point, you may understand why this is critical in doctoral writing. Synthesis of the literature in doctoral writing involves the development of academic voice. The professional development of academic writing does not end after completing a doctoral degree. The development of academic voice always does not require writing to be rigid. Remember to refrain from colloquial and conversational tone of writing in academic writing, as you could inadvertently insert bias or allow personal perceptions and feelings to disrupt the flow of writing. Critical thinking does emphasize the approach to rationalizing, analyzing, interpreting the literature or data to make informed decisions. Students often arrive in a doctoral program with more creative thinking and related approaches towards problem solving. This often comes from the broader context of problems posed in graduate level courses compared to how specific the complex problems exist found most notably in doctoral programs or even doctoral research. Now, for students who are more creative with their writing, it's not to say that it's not going to be applicable, but you may have to dovetail it a little bit with critical thinking. And so that's why it was important to highlight this particular slide, because it is quite possible to combine both approaches to develop a sound literature review or developing a research design process. As doctoral candidates continue to present as diverse based on different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, age, and different modes of learning available, such as traditional or online, the approach towards solving research problems should feature some form of evolution of the thought process as well. Cooper noted in the research that the explosion of online enrollment increases accessibility to doctoral level courses. Furthermore, as students bring various research interests into different scholar practitioner related programs, a rigid approach towards problem solving is not applicable as the research was 20 years ago. There are benefits of combining critical thinking or critical writing and creative writing. And these benefits help improve academic writing in a sense, in that the approach of a critical thinking, a creative critical thinking design could help address gaps in the literature and issues involving social activism, as well as additional problems requiring faster or more adaptive curve problems, such as research related to the coronavirus or recent political events affecting the collective psyche of Americans across the country. Furthermore, creative thinking helps spawn innovation in research and product development. Ritter and Mostert indicated cognitive flexibility to address the complexity of problems enhanced by speed, recent events, and technology characteristics of the 21st century, regardless of the industry. Divergent thinking, where multiple sets of thought processes occur, produces the capacity to generate numerous alternatives and solutions. Therefore, the approach of using a critical and creative thinking approach towards problem solving in doctoral research are necessary. However, candidates must remain mindful that the combination or singular selection of approaches continue to address complex problems. In conclusion, for this particular module, you just want to note that minimizing bias and violating assumptions prior to continuing the research will continue to produce solutions and address existing gaps to solving the industry's most complex problems. Make sure that when you do blend a critical and creative approach, that you are doing so to help influence outcomes rather than providing your personal perceptions or your viewpoints. You want to make sure that the writing still remains relatively rigid, but you still use your creative influences to make sure that you can start looking at different complex problems innovatively. And that does conclude our tutorial for this particular module. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.